The world didn't end with a bang, but with a terrible, unnatural silence that settled over the city like a shroud. John stood on his apartment balcony, the morning air tasting of ozone and something else, a faint, coppery tang that coated the back of his throat. His phone screen was a mosaic of unanswered calls and frantic, one-sided text chains that had all stopped at precisely 3:17 a.m. The apartment felt different, not just empty, but hollowed out, as if the very space had been drained of life and warmth. From the street below came a sound that made his breath hitch. Not a voice, but a low, wet scratching, like something heavy being dragged across pavement. A primal dread took hold, rooting him to the spot. This wasn't an evacuation, it was an erasure. And in that moment of paralyzing clarity, he realized the most terrifying part. He was completely, utterly alone. Or was he? The morning stillness felt unnatural, like a held breath. Clothes lay precisely arranged, as if awaiting occupants who simply ceased to be. Outside, vehicles sat cold in driveways, keys still dangling in ignitions. An ozone tang hung in the air, the only trace left behind, but not a single soul. An empty child's swing creaks back and forth in the still air. In a deserted living room, a television flickers with grainy static, casting shifting shadows across dust-covered furniture. A single-place setting rests on the table, the plate and utensils untouched but layered with a fine gray powder. This isn't a nightmare. On September 18, 1987, every single resident of Mill Haven, Ohio vanished between midnight and dawn. All 317 people simply disappeared, leaving behind cold homes and untouched lives. Only one man remained, his breath catching in his throat as the air grew thick with the scent of ozone and decay. What he witnessed that night has haunted him for 37 years, a memory he desperately tries to bury but cannot escape. John's memory begins in a sun-dappled afternoon, all warmth and golden light. But then, the recollection fractures. The golden light turns sickly. The air grows thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth. A low, resonant hum vibrates through the memory, a sound felt more than heard, making the very ground seem unsteady. This is the moment the fracture became a chasm, the last coherent second before the panic. Mill Haven was postcard-perfect, the kind of town where doors stayed unlocked and neighbors greeted you by name. 24-year-old John Carter worked at his father's hardware store, the scent of sawdust and oil clinging to his clothes. His girlfriend, Sarah, taught third grade at the elementary school, her classroom filled with crayon drawings and the quiet hum of learning. Life here moved with the gentle rhythm of shared history and familiar faces. John's best friend, Mike, served as the deputy sheriff, making their lives in this small town feel simple and predictable. But beneath that surface calm, something was always shifting. At a lakeside picnic, Sarah teased him, her voice laced with a playful, knowing dread. "You're going to forget our anniversary again, I can feel it," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. John's voice was tight with conviction. "Impossible." "Mike's setting a reminder at the station," he continued, the air thick with his assurance. "My mom's baking a cake, and old Mr. Henderson at the post office is intercepting any belated cards." A faint, metallic scent of ozone crept in as he finished. "The whole town's in on it." He smiled, but Sarah's expression tightened. Her gaze drifted toward the lake, its surface unnervingly placid. A damp chill clung to the air as she whispered, "It's too quiet today." Like the whole world is holding its breath. The unease began subtly, a shared, creeping déjà vu among townsfolk. Pets retreated into hidden corners, their fur bristling at nothing visible. Then, clocks in scattered homes fell out of sync, their ticks stuttering to a halt, until, without warning, they chimed in unison. A hollow, metallic chorus in the dead of night. The local radio DJ would occasionally go silent, and you could just make out faint, distorted whispers beneath the static. People joked it off, saying, "Must be something in the water." Then, the filter cools to blues and grays, the daytime light feeling flat and wrong. That's when the dreams began. Not nightmares, but shared visions that clung to the town like a damp chill. Each morning, the diner became a hesitant confessional, as neighbors described the same silent, starless forest, and that distant, pulsing light, steady as a heartbeat. In the hardware store, John stacked paint cans, the sharp smell of turpentine hanging in the air. Mike stumbled in, his uniform rumpled and damp with rain. His voice was tight as he relayed the call from old Mrs. Davis. The terrier wouldn't stop barking at the corner of her living room. Not at the wall, not at the floor, but at the air itself. John dismissed it with a shrug. "So? Dogs bark." Mike's voice dropped to a near whisper, heavy with unease. "John, she doesn't have a dog." A cold, damp draft seemed to seep into the room as he finished the thought. "Hasn't for 10 years." A frigid void stretched between them. The fluorescent light above buzzed angrily, then extinguished. In that instant of blackness, both glimpsed the same impossible shape. A tall, emaciated silhouette standing in the aisle. The light flickered back on, revealing nothing but empty space where the figure had been. The night of September 17th was unnaturally still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Not a whisper of wind stirred, and the usual chorus of crickets had fallen completely silent. The air grew dense and oppressive, clinging to the skin with a damp, stagnant weight. It felt like wading through invisible water. Every movement met with heavy resistance. John and Sarah lay rigid in the darkness, clinging to each other as the oppressive silence pressed down on them. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like cold iron left in rain. Sarah's whisper cut through the stillness, brittle and raw. The dream. It's not a dream, is it? It's a memory of something that hasn't happened yet. John finally fell into a fitful sleep, only to be jolted awake at 3:07 a.m. A low, resonant hum invaded the silence. A vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't loud, but heavy. A pressure that settled deep within his own skull. The air grew dense, thick with the faint, metallic scent of ozone, as the unknown hum held the night in its grip. The air grew thick, pressing down on John's chest as he struggled to breathe. A metallic scent, like old pennies and ozone, filled the empty space where Sarah had been moments before. From somewhere in the dark house came a soft, wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across wooden floorboards. Every muscle in John's body locked as a primal understanding settled in his gut. Something was in the house with him. The house stood vacant, its front door gaping like a wound. A deep, resonant hum pressed against him, thick enough to feel in his bones. He bolted outside, his breath hitching at the metallic scent hanging in the air. The street lay before him, a tableau of lives abruptly severed. The screen door swung on its hinges, creaking a lonely rhythm against the empty frame. A lawnmower sat abandoned in the middle of the yard, its blade half buried in uncut grass. The air hung thick with the scent of ozone and freshly cut stems. A sharp, unnatural stillness. He called out for Sarah, then Mike, his voice cracking into the void. No one answered. His voice vanished into the relentless hum. John sprinted toward the town square, his pulse hammering in his ears, and then he saw them. The entire population of Millhaven stood motionless in the square. They were fixed in place, a silent congregation all oriented toward the old water tower. They stood, bathed in a cold, phosphorescent light, not from moon or street lamp, but pouring from above the tower. Their heads tilted slightly, eyes open but vacant, as if seeing something beyond this world. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks, yet her expression remained utterly blank, a mask of frozen sorrow. The air smelled faintly of ozone and damp earth, heavy with a silence that felt thick enough to touch. The hum was coming from the light source above the tower, and then John saw them. Figures, tall, wispy shapes moving between the people, not around them. They were like shadows cast by nothing, bending and stretching reality around them. They weren't taking people. From his hiding place, John watched as the residents began their terrible transformation. They weren't simply vanishing, they were being unmade, their connection to this world dissolving. One by one they grew spectral, their solid forms bleeding into transparency like ink in water. The air thickened with the scent of ozone as they faded completely, absorbed by the blinding radiance. Sarah was among the final survivors. As her consciousness began to dissolve into the void, her vacant eyes suddenly sharpened, locking directly onto John's concealed position. A faint whisper drifted through the stale air, carrying both profound terror and deep sorrow. "John, look away," her voice murmured, a spectral warning that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Paralyzed by the moment, he remained fixed in place, unable to obey. He locked eyes with her as she dissolved, her final expression not fear, but a devastating pity for him. As the last light receded, one shadow figure halted its advance. Though it lacked a face, John felt its attention settle upon him like a physical weight, a cold pressure against his chest. Then, with unnerving precision, it tilted its head, mirroring the townsfolk's earlier mannerism. A frigid, alien thought forced its way into John's consciousness. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth. Shadow figure, witness, remember, this is the echo. Then, the light vanished. The hum ceased. The silence that followed was absolute. John was alone in the square, the only solid thing in a world that had become a ghost of itself. The air grew thick and cold, carrying the scent of ozone and old, damp stone. He stood paralyzed, a primal dread taking hold as the town's final echo faded into nothing. John was discovered 3 days later, wandering a desolate county road, his lips moving in a frantic, whispered litany about shadows and light. The official report dismissed it all as a mass hallucination, followed by a case of collective amnesia that erased the town's memory. Authorities sealed the area, a final quarantine, before the entire place was quietly, methodically demolished. But in a dingy apartment, John sits facing a wall papered with frantic notes and maps, a single faded Polaroid of Sarah clutched in his trembling hand, the only proof it ever happened. The case was buried. John's gaze remains fixed, locked on something only he can perceive. But he knows what he saw. The memory is etched in his mind, a grotesque tableau he cannot unsee, and he knows why he was spared. The reason hangs in the air, like the metallic scent of ozone after a storm. He wasn't saved. He was left behind, condemned to remember, to feel the crushing vacuum they all felt. In that final, silent moment, he is the anchor, tethering Millhaven's restless ghost to our world. Next time you find yourself in a quiet town, and that stillness feels unnaturally heavy, listen closely to what isn't there. Beneath the surface calm, A low, resonant vibration begins to thrum through the foundations. A sound felt more than heard. Is it peace, or is it a presence, holding its breath? Or is it the pause before the echo? And if you detect a faint, impossible hum on the edge of your hearing, ask yourself one question. Are you the next witness, or are you the one who disappears? The hum didn't fade with the video's end. It lingered, a tangible vibration in the air. For a heartbeat, the oppressive drone hung in the silence, thick with the scent of ozone and cold metal. It was a physical presence, a low-frequency pressure against the eardrums that felt sticky and damp. Then, as abruptly as it had persisted, the air went still, leaving only a hollow, ringing quiet in its wake.